After a torrid year living down the interesting but horribly flawed G5, LG has seemingly come good with this, the G6. It does seem as though the even numbered in the G range is always the one to go for. True, there's nothing spectacular here, but then that's kind of the point. This is LG doubling down on doing just everything right, rather than striking down a new blind alley yet again. Notable here is a 2-to-1 screen with smaller top and bottom bezels, but elsewhere it's a set of intelligent compromises to try and create a smartphone that's all things to all men. And they've kind of succeeded, at least away from the geek expectations cutting edge. After the G4 with its optionally leather removable back and the horrible G5 with its pop-off bottom section that never quite matched, the G6 is solid, one piece, almost boringly standard, yet with a really tough and solid aluminium chassis with chamfered and mostly flattened sides. I love it. It makes the G6 really easy to grip, unlike some of the slippery, all-rounded devices I've seen of late, Galaxy S8. Thankfully, there's no oleophobic coating on the back, the kiss of death for phone grip on some competitors. This does mean that fingerprints show, especially on the Review Gloss Black model, but there's also Ice Platinum and Mystic White to choose from, and these should show fingerprints a lot less. Also helping a grip is the narrower form factor. The 2-to-1 screen allows for a 5.7-inch display here, yet the width of the phone is only 72mm, meaning that I could wrap my hand right round it with finger and thumb touching. The 5.7-inch figure for screen diagonal is a little misleading, of course, since the aspect ratio is unusual, but I suspect we'll see more and more phones adopt a similar idea. So screen area and square centimetres should be used instead to compare displays. The G6 works out about 85 square centimetres compared to 89 for the also 5.7-inch Nexus 6P. In truth, the difference this makes is negligible. What really matters is the feel in the hand, and the G6 is top-notch in this regard. You'll still use a case a lot of the time though, if only because of all the exposed glass and the likelihood that shattering will occur when dropped. The display itself is a very decent QHD LCD panel with excellent colours and contrast in all light conditions, at least when viewed head on. When viewed from an angle, such as someone looking from the side over your shoulder, or you trying to take a photo from an arty viewpoint, then contrast does decrease markedly, but it's fine for everyday use. The use of LCD as a technology means that the G6's display isn't fast enough for Google's Daydream VR, so if that's on your checklist, then look elsewhere. The G6's panel and underlying chipset is Dolby Vision, HDR10 compliant, and demo videos look absolutely stunning with a fantastic range of colours, though LG has missed a trick here by not also including stereo speakers. As it is, we have smartphones like the fabulous ZTE Axon 7 with Dolby Atmos stereo speakers that sound incredible, yet with a standard display in terms of colour gamut. Then this G6 has the Dolby Vision compliant display, but only an average mono speaker down the bottom. Why the heck can't we have both? There's not an amazing amount of Dolby Vision content online at the moment, though Netflix has started to produce true HDR streams for its top-tier subscribers in some regions. Early days. The volume buttons here are positive in action and made of metal too. There are top and bottom microphone holes for stereo audio recording when shooting video. And this does work well for general usage, but it isn't really a gig recording phone. The microphones do distort at really high concert volumes. There's a welcome headphone jack. For every major smartphone that keeps this essential port, I give a cheer. Apple was wrong to ditch the 3.5mm jack in 2016, in my opinion, and I'm very glad that most manufacturers in the Android world aren't copying it slavishly. Down at the bottom is a USB Type-C port, of course. This is now the 2017 standard, and anything above £100 which doesn't have it is missing a huge trick. Type-C is so much more robust, physically, so much more capable in terms of power, and it's reversible. In the G6's case, the phone is quick charge 3.0 compliant and charges amazingly quickly from compatible chargers. Around the back is a fingerprint sensor that's on the small side and does take some finding with your index finger. It's set into a small indentation and can be found, but I don't understand why LG had to make this so small. Every other device I have in for review right now has a larger sensor, making it easier to find. Blind. Still, it works and it doubles as a power button. In traditional G-series fashion, it's slightly odd day-to-day, mind you, since it turns on with a light capacitive touch, yet requires a physical press to turn off again. You do get used to this, but most of the time it's easier just to let the phone screen power off on the usual timeout. The fit and finish of the G6 is backed up by full IP68 water and dust proofing, which is good to see. Microphones, headphone jack, SIM and micro SD slot, charging port, speaker, all points of possible water ingress, and all sealed tight with no unsightly or fiddly grommets. Now that's impressive. Above all this is the camera cluster neatly set flush into the phone's glass back. This does restrict the height, i.e. front to back, of the two cameras. It means that neither can have a large sensor, unfortunately. Both are only a 1/3 of an inch optical format, the main one with f/1.8 aperture, OIS and phase detection autofocus, the wide angle camera with only f/2.4 aperture, 120 degree field of view and fixed focus. See the samples here for quality. The G6 cameras are, quote, good enough, but no more. Over-sharpening and overuse of HDR, both in all light conditions, mean that artifacts are everywhere if you look closely. As usual with LG's twin camera phones, the switch from regular lens to wide angle is usually done manually using an on-screen icon, though the camera app will also auto-switch if you try and zoom in too far on the wide angle camera or out too far on the regular one. It's well thought out, and I was surprised by how much I used and enjoyed having a wide angle lens on my phone camera. Of course, I'd also like a 2x zoom lens as on the iPhone 7 Plus, so I'm calling it right now. By mid-2018, we'll have phones with 3 cameras on the back laid out in a line, wide, regular and zoom, and then I'll be happy. In addition to the regular camera operation, there's also a square preset running the exact same application but with some tweaks. The 2:1 display means that square images line up neatly beside the live square viewfinder. The results are 9.7 megapixel square images and 1080p square videos, neither of which really fits neatly into most people's workflows, though Instagram users will probably be very happy. It's a novel use for a novel display. Video capture from this main camera is up to 4K, and with the stereo audio capture already mentioned, there's optional digital stabilization on top of the OIS. The two combined make for very steady footage, even though it's not quite as impressive, I found, as that in the recent Google Pixel. The front selfie camera is unremarkable at 5 megapixels. It is quite wide angle at 120 degrees, so should suffice to get plenty of the scene in when needed. Notable when the LG G6 is powered up but with the screen off is LG's implementation of an always-on glance screen, showing time, date, battery state and percent, and the icons for some recent notifications. It's done very well. In fact, especially well, since LCD screens are not best suited to always-on content, since the whole phone screen has to be lit to some degree in order for any pixels to be seen. The only caveat I'd had here is that in a very dark bedroom, you can easily see the glow from the LCD illuminating strip at the bottom, plus a graduated light haze from the entire display. The G6 is very fast in operation, one of the fastest feeling phones I've ever reviewed in terms of the speed of the user interface, proving that LG's UX 6.0 is relatively light in terms of resources. This despite the G6 using a Snapdragon 821 chipset and not the latest 835. Leaving aside political issues over whether LG could or could not have managed to procure enough of the latter, it makes absolutely no difference to the end user. The G6 just flies, helped by 4 GB of RAM, a very nice complement to the 821, and all of this running on Android 7.0 Nougat, of course. UX 6.0 includes the option of a traditional app drawer home screen or an all-on-the-panes approach. It's good to have the choice, though. The drawerless default makes perfect sense for new users, and it's not until you have 40 or more third-party applications or games installed that more organisation is needed. Talking of choice, the virtual controls can also be customized with a total of 6 options and 5 slots, and you can have these in any combination or order you like. There are the usual application overlaps, with LG wanting to use its own gallery, context, calendar, music player and so on, but these aren't huge issues as a whole, and they all operate on the same data. There's no real bloatware as such, thankfully, with just a couple of recent additions to the LG stable. HD audio recorder looks a capable utility, but is currently inexplicably restricted to mono. Surely this is a bug. And then there's the impressive Smart Doctor, an onboard diagnostics app for end users, clearing out Android temporary files and individually testing all the various sensors in the phone. In terms of using the extra screen real estate here on the G6 with its unusual aspect ratio, my fears were unfounded. The Android world has had several years of different resolutions and subtle ratio changes, virtual controls on one phone and capacitive on the next, with the result that all the apps I tried adapted perfectly to the 2:1 screen, altering their UI natively or existing with an LG virtual control bar here at the bottom. Let's try a different application. Go back to, here's a guitar tuner I like. There we are. Again, the virtual control bar with the application 16.9 window on top. The video material, so YouTube, Netflix, etc., was presented with black bars on either side of the central playback window. Not an issue at all on the black review G6 since the bars melt into the case colour, but I can imagine this being a bit unsightly on the platinum and white version, so a reason to stick with the black G6 and fingerprints be damned. By the way, this is a demonstration of the speaker volume. Mono speaker at the bottom. It's decent, without being overwhelming, and of course no stereo effect. LG wisely avoids a Bixby moment, and for voice it uses the pure Google Assistant, just as on the Pixel phones. Okay Google, what's the temperature in Moscow right now?
In Moscow it's currently 14 degrees.
There we are. Google Assistant is coming on fast, and it's utterly reassuring that LG has tied itself close to the Android standard here, rather than risking all on a leap into a competitive unknown. The built-in battery is 3300 mAh. LG's move from replaceable batteries is unfortunate but timely. While having such a feature is a big unique selling point in the smartphone world of today, you could also argue that the competitors, Samsung and so forth, they all use sealed batteries without problem. Well, almost without problem. Year in, year out, and reduced capacity rarely does seem to be an issue. One interesting oddity is that the USA version of the LG G6 also gets a Qi and PMA wireless charging, whereas the world versions, such as this one, don't. This is puzzling since the dimensions are the same, implying that the world version is either a millimetre thicker than it needs to be, or more likely the coils are just there in both cases, and it's a quirk of either the exact chipset variant used or perhaps a marketing differentiator. Along similar lines, the Korean G6 gets a quad DAC option, i.e. extra electronics, to amplify and process music output through headphones. This does apparently work brilliantly, but is heavy on battery, is turned off by default, and presumably omitted on world G6s so that users didn't get themselves into battery trouble. Plus, the EU has much stricter controls over the volume gadgets can pump out through headphones. You get the standard constant nanny state volume warnings here. Grr! Look, LG, as with Google, Sony, and just about everyone else in the phone world, has been eyeing up Apple's share of the smartphone industry's profits, and has spared no expense in producing things with unibody aluminium chassis and premium components in an attempt to justify a progressively higher price for each year's flagship. The G6 here comes in at somewhere around £650, including VAT in the UK, depending on where you look. Is it worth your hard-earned money? Well, it might be. It depends on your needs. As mentioned just now, the G6 represents a huge set of compromises, yet they're intelligent compromises. The screen's compromised in being LCD and not AMOLED, but this makes sense in terms of cost, longevity, and being less power hungry when dealing with today's white-themed apps and web pages. The camera is compromised in being restricted in size by the need for a flush back, but LG does enough with it, and with the wide-angle option, that its photos, well, will please most people. The chipset is compromised in being last year's Snapdragon 821, yet there are gains here in build cost and power management. Then there are the weak points, such as the average mono speaker rather than stereo, the lack of Daydream VR compliance, and the need for black bars when watching videos. But put these into perspective against the things that LG did right. The superb feel in the hand, the good wide-angle camera, the HDR display, the component choices, including that 3.5mm jack up the top, and the waterproofing, the light skin on top of Android, the use of Google Assistant, the good battery life, all drive me to tentatively recommend the G6 as perhaps the pick of the current 2017 crop. It's not the flashiest, nor the most advertised, and there are no outstanding unique selling points, but I predict that most buyers will be happy with this over the course of a typical 2-year contract. This is the LG G6.